On this week's episode, I will be talking about the coronavirus, the prophet Amos and Jesus. How does that all tie together? It may not matter because you may not like what I have to say, but I will say it anyway. Are you ready? Welcome to the Church 2060 podcast, where we talk about all things church, where we've been, what we've learned, and where we're going. I'm Mike Brewer. Hello, everyone. Thank you for listening. This is the podcast about all things church, past, present, and future. And this is a wild week. I have been on doctor-imposed quarantine. I am feeling good. I have a lot on my mind, and I might talk for way too long. But please bear with me. I have a lot to say, and I am tired of being on quarantine. I'm tired of having to not come out of my room or not come out and be around other people, which apparently I won't be able to do anyway, so I might as well get used to that. But today, I have some things on my mind that are particularly bothering me, specifically about the church. And again, when I say the church, I am talking about the people that make up the body of Christ. And it's something that, quite frankly, I've been seeing I've been seeing for as long as I can remember. And I've been hearing quite a bit of nonsense lately. I mean, I've been hearing everything from this is Trump's genocide to the Democrats only care about themselves and their agenda, to this coronavirus is God's judgment on this country for policies that were a part of the Obama administration. I even heard it go back as far as people saying this is judgment because of what we let Bill Clinton do. And this is stuff I've all heard coming from the church, and it's driving me bananas. So today, I'm going to address those things. I said at the top of the show, I want to talk about the prophet Amos, Jesus, and the coronavirus. Sounds like very odd bedfellows, but I'm going to put all that together for you. And I want you to see where I'm going, and I want you to make this an introspective situation. Not complaining about everybody else, which it kind of will sound like that's what I'm doing, complaining about the church, but I do this because I don't want the church to implode. I don't want the church to become something irrelevant or ineffective because we're always concerned about what someone else is doing. So I'm going to start with the prophet Amos, and we'll end with Jesus. That sounds like a good place to end, considering I think the entire Bible is a collection of stories that culminate with Jesus. Now, if you've not read the book of Amos before, I'm going to suggest you read the book of Amos. It's short. In fact, throw it in if you have an audio Bible, listen to that. It's short. You will get through it quickly. It may not all make sense to you, and that's fine. A lot of things aren't going to make sense in the Old Testament, but know this, Amos was a prophet, and this book is a pretty negative book geared toward God's people, right? And God ends up saying some very judgmental things, very angry things toward his people and their worship. And there was a reason for it. And I'm going to read you a piece from Amos chapter 5. And then we'll kind of dig into it a little bit. And these are some really rough verses, so work with me here. This is God talking. He says, this is Amos chapter 5, verse 21. And I'm kind of going to get through most of the chapter. At the end of the chapter here, it says, I hate all your show and pretense, the hypocrisy of your religious festivals and solemn assemblies. I will not accept your burnt offerings and grain offerings. I won't even notice all of your choice peace offerings. Away with your noisy hymns of praise. I will not listen to the music of your harps. Instead, I want to see a mighty flood of justice and an endless river of righteous living. Now that's pretty rough. There's translations that read it as, I don't want to hear your solemn assemblies and your church services. Like he's just sick of what they're doing. And there's a reason for it. If you read this book or listen to it, and another thing I would suggest, listen to it, and then watch the Bible Project video on it. It'll give you a little more of a round insight than what I'm going to be able to do in the short time I have your ear right now. But God's mad. He's mad at his people because they're going on as a church, as his people, as if they're good, but they're ignoring everything around them, all the injustice going on around them. They're ignoring the poor. They're ignoring the poor in spirit, and they're going on as if all that's irrelevant to them and they're having their service. They're worshiping, they're singing their hymns, right? They're praising, they're having their service while everything's being ignored all around them. Now that's rough. If God says that to you, that's a bad day, right? That's not okay. But I feel like we're missing something today. Are we not? We as a church feel like we can tell everybody else how to vote. We can tell everybody else what they can and can't do. But all the while, we're looking around saying, we're going to have our services. We want our rights and our privileges protected. We want to be able to go to church and have our religious freedom. But outside of that, that's where it stops. We want what's ours. We want to tell you how to live. We want to tell you how to vote. We want to tell you how to live your life. We want to have our cake and eat it too. But in this book, now don't get me wrong, I don't buy into this as a nation stuff, right? We are not Israel. We are not God's chosen people, right? That's an Old Testament kind of deal for his people, right? We are now the body of Christ. That kind of stuff's over. But there's a lesson to be learned here. Okay, God isn't interested in our worship services and our gatherings if we don't care about certain things like the poor or injustice. And we can argue, if you want, about what's justice and what's not, like who deserves justice and who doesn't. But there are things going on that we ignore because it doesn't fit in with what we say the church is politically and what we say what the church is doing now. So, for example, politically, as a whole, the church tends to have that little R next to their name. We tend to support whatever the guys with the R next to their name are doing. Why? Because we think we have the moral high ground, right? Because a conservative, the guy with the R next to their name, is generally pro-life, and we don't believe in abortion, and that's good. You shouldn't. It's awful. It's terrible. But let's take a second, and in your own head, count the number of other things that Jesus would have cared about that this party with the little R next to it cares about. They certainly haven't been known to be the party who cares about the poor or the poor in spirit. Social programs tend to disappear. We tend to ignore things like families being separated at the borders or refugees or kids in cages. That's a real thing. And you might say, but Mike, that's very little. There's very few. The media blows it out of proportion. I don't care. If it's happening, it's happening. Or you might say, that was actually started under the Obama administration. That's not a Trump thing. The laws are just being enforced. We should enforce the laws. We can't decide what laws we should enforce and which ones we shouldn't. If there's injustice happening, we should not be okay with it, no matter what it is. No matter who started it, who's supporting it, we should not be okay with it as a church. God made it very clear that he's not interested in anything from us as a church if we don't care about A, how we're behaving, and B, about justice. Guys, it's time we stop thinking about everything everybody else is doing, and we think about what makes God upset, or worse, in my mind, worse than God being upset, is God not caring about our services, or God not caring about us worshiping him. Do you ever feel like you disappointed somebody in your life? You try to do something for them, but you've disappointed them so bad they can't get past it, and it hurts, right? Maybe it was a parent or a child or a spouse, someone you love, a friend. You've disappointed them or hurt them, and no matter what you do, you can't make up for that or get past it, right? I kind of feel like that's what's happening here in Amos. God sees people telling other people what to do, ignoring injustices, ignoring the poor, ignoring all the things that a loving body would do, and then expecting God to accept their services and their praises. It doesn't work that way. It really doesn't. And those are hard verses to read, and I get it. But when I hear things like, this is judgment on our nation because we have allowed gay marriage to happen. Okay, that the Bible seems to be pretty clear about that. It's wrong. So yeah, maybe that's right. No, I don't think so. Okay? I really don't think so. I think we, as a church, should spend less time trying to tell other people what to do and how to live and who to vote for and how to act, and worry about our own righteous living, just like Amos chapter 5, verse 24 says. Or instead, of telling people how to vote, or arguing with people over what's right or what's wrong, or telling them what they can and can't do. Maybe we should spend a little bit more time doing what Jesus did, which is making sure that the poor in spirit were taken care of, or that people's needs were met, or like Jesus did when he asked people what they desire. Maybe those are the things we should put in place first before we decide we need to tell everybody else what they need to do or how they need to live, right? Now, it's time to change gears. All right, now, this time, we get to the part where I want to talk about Jesus. And this is really my favorite part, because one of the things I do in my role as a pastor, as a discipleship pastor, is I come up with reading plans for the church. And not only come up with a reading plan, but we take a season and we read a book of the Bible or a set of books. And right now we're reading Matthew, and we're doing it from January through Easter. So we're taking the entire life of Jesus from birth to resurrection, and that's pretty exciting. I love that because we're going to read the whole story. We're right in the thick of it right now. Actually, we're getting kind of close to the end. We're getting close to where he's arrested, and it's a great read. I absolutely love it. But we themed this season, This is Jesus. This passage particularly, I like the way I said that because it sounded horrible, but this passage is straight up Jesus. And one of the things I love about him so much, I'm going to read Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 through 5. And I'm reading from the NLT if I didn't mention that. But it says, Jesus says, "Do not judge others, and you will not be judged. For you will be treated as you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. And why worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? How can you think of saying to your friend, 'Let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye,' when you can't see past the log in your own eye? Hypocrite. First get rid of the log in your own eye, then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye." That is classic Jesus, if you ask me. Let's go right back to the beginning of it, right? He's talking about judgment. He says, don't judge other people, and you won't be judged, for you'll be treated as you treat others, right? It's just the standard you use in judging will be the standard by which you will judge. In other words, you want to heap judgment on other people? Guess what? It's going to get heaped right back on you, okay? And in the same thought, he does the old log in your own eye, right? The classic log in your own eye story, right? Jesus says, don't worry about the speck in someone else's eye when you have a log in your own. Now, I don't know about you, but I've got some logs in my eye, right? There are some things that are definitely wrong with me, okay? Spiritually, I have some issues, right? I probably shouldn't be a pastor or have a podcast, but that's true. I have things in my life that I'm trying to work through and trying to get out. If I took a second and looked at all the logs in my own eye, and if the church would take a second, but starting with myself, if I looked at all the logs in mine and dealt with all those before I went to someone else and said, you have this problem, fix it. Oh my gosh, right? What a difference it would make. That whole righteous living thing that Amos brought up, it might make a big difference in my life if I worried about the logs in my own, right? But we do that, right? We tend to say, you are sinning, you are doing that wrong, you need to get your life together, come see Jesus, right? That's what we do. That's how we that's how we have this. I shouldn't say we talk that because we don't always do that. We don't do this as a whole, but our thing, right? Our thing, and I remember this from the 80s, definitely in the 90s, and it's still happening now. Our thing tends to be, get your act together. That's wrong. You're not allowed to do it. We're going to make it illegal. And what we've done is created this separation between the church and just about everybody else, right? Because we are telling people what they should and shouldn't do, what they can and can't do, and what they should legally be allowed to do or not. And I don't know what you think, but that creates some separation. All at the same time, they're looking at us and saying, well, wait a minute, aren't you the people that have a lot of preachers that have affairs or have gay affairs or end up in jail, right? What, in the 80s, I remember TV preachers going to prison. That isn't something new, right? The church I grew up in, the pastor never was brought to justice, but he stole money, he ruined lives, he hurt people. That's not new. Everybody sees what's going on inside the church. They see how we behave as individuals, And then they see us tell them how to vote or tell them what they can and can't do. And that creates separation. That creates a divide, okay? Now, look, I'm not telling you that sin is wrong. I'm not telling you that sin is okay. I'm telling you we have to look at the log in our own eye first if we want someone else to hear what we have to say. Jesus didn't mince words. He said, if you want to be judged, look out for the way you're judging other people, right? You're going to get judgment heaped on you the same way you heap it on other people. So when we sit here and say, you are not allowed to do that, that's immoral, we're going to vote, make sure you're not allowed to do that ever again, do you think people stop and say, oh, okay, that makes sense. Thank you for telling me what I can and can't do. I appreciate that. Good idea. Thank you. No, that's not what they're saying. They get upset just like we do when we look and we see things that shouldn't be, right? When we see things that contradict what our beliefs say. Except we don't tend to stop and think about the words of Jesus, right? We have to pay attention to what we're doing before we worry about what everybody else is doing. We have to look at our own eye before we worry about what's going on in someone else's eye. It's simple. And you know how I know that's true? Because that's what Jesus said. I get a little fired up about it. I really do, because I see how much division and separation has happened in this country. Because instead of acting like Jesus, instead of doing what he said, instead of fulfilling the Great Commission, we instead hide in our walls or hide behind our walls, go to the ballot box, tell people what to do, tell people what's wrong with them, tell them how to act and behave before they can be a part of us, instead of just fulfilling the Great Commission. It's hard for me. It's hard for me to be okay with that. It's hard for me to put up with it because it gets me really fired up. Guys, I don't want to be judged based on the way I've judged other people. And I say this not in a spirit of haughtiness. I am guilty of this just like everyone else is. I often turn on the TV and I see vitriolic behavior, anger, and I can't understand why someone would act like that when they know that that's not right. But at the same time, I look at myself and I'm like, man, I'm not right either. I'm really not right. And I can't go to them and judge them when I'm not taking care of myself, when I'm not taking the logs out of my own eye. It's just the way it is. So I said I wanted to talk about Amos and Jesus and the coronavirus. And here's where I'm going to tie this all together. You've probably figured it out already. But if there's a place where if we want to sit here and think this is God's judgment, right? This is God's judgment because of the sin we've allowed in this country. And we need to pray for this nation. If that's the attitude we have, I believe we have missed the mark. And I mean, if you're an archer and you got a target, right? And that target, let's say it's 4x4, right? You've missed it far. When I was in high school, I took an archery class and we had the target set up, and we were in this pole barn, and behind it was hay, right? To catch the stray arrows. We were little heathens, right? We would take the arrows when the instructor wasn't around, and we would shoot and try to shoot through the wall above the hay of the pole barn, missing completely. They were so mad. We got in so much trouble, but I'm telling you, that's how far we're missing the mark. We are deliberately missing that mark if that's what we think. No, here is what I believe. And you can tell me I'm crazy. I want to hear from you if that's what you think, but you can tell me I'm crazy. Just like Jesus said, when it comes to judgment and worrying about what's in someone else's eye, just like Amos said, or God said through Amos, the prophet, saying he's sick of our assemblies. He's sick of our solemn assemblies and our hymns and our worship when we don't care about justice or we don't care about the poor or righteous living. Guys, if this is judgment, this isn't judgment on this country because of what someone who disagrees with us has done, or someone who's lawmakers have who disagree with us. It isn't judgment because of what they've done. If it's judgment because the church has become more of a country club than it has been a life-saving station. If this is judgment, it's judgment on the church because we aren't concerned about justice. If this is judgment, it's judgment on the church because we are not living righteously. If this is judgment, It's judgment on the church because we won't take the log out of our own eye before we worry about the speck in someone else's. Guys, I don't believe this is judgment because we've let someone who disagrees with us pass a law that goes against our beliefs. I think this is judgment because as a church, we haven't lived up to what Jesus has done. We haven't lived up to how Jesus lived. We haven't taken care of the poor. We haven't worried about justice. We let all kinds of things go on because we're blinded to the logs that are in our own eye. I could go on for another half an hour, but I'm going to stop. Guys, I think we have to look inward before we worry about what's going on anywhere else. When it comes to judgment, I think we need to be really careful because we judge everybody else for what they're doing, but we don't judge ourselves. We're really good as a church about saying what we do well, but we're not really good about looking at the things that we're just completely missing the mark on. It's easy to look and see what Jesus wanted us to worry about. It's all there. You can read the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus will tell you what's important, what you need to spend your time doing. And if you read it, pay attention to it, the only times Jesus got mad, for the most part, and got upset with people, and really hammered down on what they were doing wrong, it was church folk. You can argue with me and tell me there were other times, but Jesus really got upset with the church and the church leaders because of how they had turned the church away from what it was supposed to be. Guys, this is our opportunity as a church to come out of this not judging other people, not heaping judgment on them, not telling them what to do or how to vote or how to live or what's wrong with them, but to love them like Christ loved the church. This is our opportunity. This is our time. When we come out of this, if we're still the same old church, we've missed the mark again. Guys, I love the church, and I love the church because the church is the body of Christ, and I've seen it go through a lot, and I don't want to see it fail one more time. I'm going to stop talking there, but please go back, read the words of Jesus, read Amos, watch the Bible Project video on Amos, and consider how we're handling these days. These times are strange, but this is our opportunity as a church to be the church. This has been the Church 2060 podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please let me know. I'm at Church 2060 on Instagram and Twitter. And if you're enjoying the show, please let me know by hitting subscribe. It is free, and you will be notified when new episodes drop.